It's your Locked On Flyers podcast for Friday, August 26th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is excited to continue our crossover series and check in on the Washington Capitals.
It'll be fun.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, I'm Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on Twitter at Sportsology. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. You can follow us on Twitter at Locked On Flyers. That's where you'll keep up to date on all the Flyers news and our episodes. You can also email the show at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. On today's show, we do have a little bit of Flyers news about their training and medical staff that we talked about on Wednesday's show. Then we're going to get into our Metro Division crossover talk with Dan from Locked On Capitals. We're going to hear all about what the Caps were up to this offseason and what their prospects are heading into this upcoming year. Locked On Flyers is free and available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, wherever you are listening. So subscribe. You'll get all of our episodes here on the Locked On Podcast Network. So, Russ, I guess it was fortuitous that we did talk about this on Wednesday. And lo and behold, out of nowhere, the Flyers announced yesterday that after a global search, and I guess it really was a global search, they hired Ian McKeown, who has been with Port Adelaide FC of the AFL in Australia for the last 9 years. And they've created a new position, Vice President, Athlete Performance and Wellness.
So, my first question when I saw this was, we're late August. Guys have been training all summer. But even if I'm a player on this team and I know the hammer's about to drop, I'm getting in my last Chipotle, Dunkin' Donuts, last shake or whatever before I hit camp now because I have no idea what's coming. But anything I did in the last 3 or 4 months, this guy can't fix, not right away. So I don't understand the timing of it. We talked about this months and months and months ago, and this has crawled on all summer, and now they did something. But who knows if this could even impact this season other than maybe some of the youngsters, when they leave camp, they have a better idea what to do when they, go play their other season.
Yeah, I do think it's one of those things that's going to take time, right? When you have a new position that's kind of putting a bunch of stuff that you've done maybe separately under a single umbrella and maybe with a new philosophy that this guy is going to come in, it's going to take time to figure out what systems he wants, his personnel, and, figure all of that out. And we could be waiting 6, 8 months before anything concrete gets fully implemented. So I think you're right there as far as the timing. It does seem like they did do some diligence in terms of the quote unquote global search, and
Sure.
sometimes these things take that long and they wanted to get the right person. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt on that front. And I think they just know that it's going to take time no matter who they picked and when they picked, and this was the right choice for them. Now time will tell. We don't have a ton of information so far, and they haven't had a press conference as of recording, to ask any questions about the hire or what exactly his role will be and how that affects medical staff and all of that. So more information to come, I would hope, but at least it seems like they weren't ignoring the problem.
Okay, that's fair. The only thing I would say just to counter that is, like even in this camp, it's not going to improve their training method for, the first month or two of the season. So if we feel like they're still a slow skating team, he's not going to be able to help right away. And so that's something where, like, to me, when I was going out to hire this guy, that was a big issue with the team. The team was slow. They were slow at start of games. What can you do to help me with this? and he might have an answer, but now getting that implemented is going to take a while.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you there. We'll see how it goes. And again, hopefully we get some more information about what he's looking to do and specifics on, what he brings to the table from his, experience in the AFL that he's had. We are going to dive right in now to our Locked On crossover with Dan from Locked On Capitals. Lots of great conversation about what the Caps have been up to and some interesting questions with the injuries they have. So here's that right now. All right. So, continuing our series of checking in with some of our friends in the Metro division, we are thrilled to welcome to the show from Locked On Capitals, Dan Holmi. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, Dan, heading into this offseason, what were the biggest issues that the Caps were facing, and how do you think they did overall?
I mean, I think that Brian McClellan swung for the fences. I kind of criticized him on my podcast all season long, saying, why didn't you do something with the netminding situation? We take a look at this Washington Capitals team, this rock the red era, if you will, of Alex Ovechkin. And we know that we have a limited time with him on this team. So it kind of seemed like they squandered these last 2 years with kind of inconsistency in net in the form of Vitek Vanacek and Ilya Samsonov. But he went out and he solidified the netminding situation, getting Darcy Kuemper and Charlie Lindgren. I don't think you can go out and get a bigger netminder than Darcy Kuemper, on paper anyway. I think he's going to be a great netminder. You take a look at the injuries that the Capitals face with Tom Wilson. The Capitals got Connor Brown, and then they got Dylan Strome to take Nick Backstrom's spot. Nick Backstrom has that hip resurfacing procedure that was done. And just honestly, it's the outcome on that doesn't look that great. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that he will be able to come back, but I feel positive that they got Dylan Strome and that Brian McClellan, the GM, was so active to take care of all the holds in the lineup.
Yeah, I think he did, and I think for the most part you'll be happy with Kuemper. He's going to have moments where you're not going to be happy with him, but if the defense is there to help him, he'll be good. But you mentioned Tom Wilson, and last year Brett Leeson filled the role, and he's not the same player, but he's the same size. He's got some offensive ability. Do you anticipate early in the year he's going to fill that same role?
Yeah, I mean, I think Connor Brown could fill that line. He could also play on the second line right wing. There's another guy in Hershey, Beck Malenstein as well, a big frame that I think would fit in there as well. I think that, like what Brian McClellan said, is just because you think you know where these players are going to go, that doesn't necessarily mean where they're going to end up going. These players are going to have to fight for their jobs. There's guys on the Capitals, Connor McMichael, that's going to fight for his job as playing a center. Also defensively, if you take a look at it, Lucas Johansson and Alex Alexiev when he comes back from his surgery. So I think that the team is sketched out in a certain way, but what actuality will be after the training camp might be something completely different.
Well, since I was going to ask you about McMichael, I'm assuming Strome is going to play higher in the lineup at least to start. Where does that leave McMichael? Like a 3C, 4C spot? Is that what it is?
Yeah, so the interesting thing there is that Lars Eller, everyone was talking about it, and I talked about it in my podcast, that it was probably his last year on the Capitals. And then we had that bombshell dropped that Nick Backstrom is going to be out for a long period. And all of a sudden, Lars Eller became a little bit more relevant. So I think it's going to be a battle for that third line, if it's going to be Lars Eller or Connor McMichael. I know that Connor McMichael generally likes to play on the wing, but, these young guys are kind of a Swiss Army knife. They'll play wherever you need them, essentially. But I think that, Lars Eller's production has seen a dip. So I think that is going to be, a battle there. I think that the fourth line is going to be pretty much solidified. If they get Hagelin coming back, you got Dowd and Hathaway, kind of that snarl line out there, if you will. I think that they got great production from the fourth line. So I don't think they're going to want to tinker with that one too much.
I was just wondering where Dylan Strome goes then in that lineup.
Dylan Strome is ostensibly going to be the second line center. Evgeny Kuznetsov is generally speaking the top line. center. But, every once in a while, if Nick Backstrom comes back, if they're looking for that great goal-scoring touch, it's about putting Backstrom and Ovechkin on the same line together. You could make the argument that Alex Ovechkin, who will one day be the best goal scorer of all time, I really do believe, I don't think that he would have reached that level if it wasn't for someone like Nick Backstrom serving him them passes to his office at the left circle there.
I'll fight that. I don't think he's going to catch Gretzky, but I think he'll have a big number at the end. That's okay. Also, you mentioned Lucas Johansson. I don't know if I would exactly count on him, but with the guys that the Caps have on defense, I have to say I think Dmitry Orlov is probably one of the more underrated defensemen in the league. He just kind of never gets talked about.
Yeah, and he has some great offensive upside to him as well.
Yep.
And just a really a big tough guy out there. Alan May, who covers the Washington Capitals, said, you guys think you know who the tough guy is, but you should see Dmitry Orlov out there. He's got legs like tree trunks out there. So he has that offensive upside, and he brings a real physical aspect to the game like a lot of the other Russians do on the team as well.
Up next, we'll have more with Dan from Locked On Caps. But first, betonline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports information. You can find league reviews and news on every league, including Major League Baseball, and everything you need leading up to the upcoming NFL, NBA, and NHL seasons. They even cover combat sports, esports, and golf too. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to scores and podcasts and more. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events. Head to the BetOnline website today or use your mobile device. You can learn more about all the trends in action at BetOnline, where the game starts. You mentioned Beck Mallenstein, who is somebody that we've seen quite a bit watching Phantoms games up against Hershey. And I'm just wondering if, in addition to him, there's any other top prospects in the system or Hershey guys that could crack the lineup.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting there. You have Leeson, you have Protas, Mallenstein, like I talked about. There's that Vecchione as well. A lot of these guys, Hendrix Lapierre, I can't overlook Hendrix Lapierre, kind of the crown jewel in the Washington Capitals organization, a guy that played on juniors primarily last year, but had a brief stint with the Washington Capitals in the beginning of the season. But I think that Hendrix Lapierre will end up playing in Hershey. I do think that, Leeson and Protas and a lot of these guys are going to fight to get their jobs. I think that, like I say, that Strome and Connor Brown are there, but that doesn't mean, that one of these big guys, one of these young guys couldn't come in and take the job from them. And then if you also take a look at net, just kind of fanning out and widening the lens a little bit there as well, is you take a look at Charlie Lindgren, a guy that's a bit of an unproven commodity. He played really well for St. Louis and in their farm team there as well. But the Capitals have someone else in Hershey in the form of Zach Fucale. I was a bit surprised that they didn't go with him. They could have got him on the cheap, and just a really solid netminder. Had 3 shutouts back-to-back for Hershey and was lights out the time he did play with the Capitals. But I think that, a lot like the Washington Capitals, you take a look at the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Boston Bruins, aging rosters, I think you're going to see changes over time. But certain promises were made to Alex Ovechkin that he would stay on a competitive team. So you're not going to see these wholesale changes until after the Alex Ovechkin era, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think they are doing everything they can to keep Ovi. I think the thing with Fucale is he's had such a sojourn since his draft, but Lindgren's bigger, right? I think they're looking for that backup to be bigger, probably. Just to be on the safe side in case Kuemper, has issues. That's just my feeling. I don't know if that's the way they're going. But also looking at the Capitals, TJ Oshie is a guy that, has gotten tougher over the years, but his scoring has dipped. I feel like without Backstrom now, and I don't think Backstrom will be back this year anyhow, just to kind of throw that out there. I know this injury has derailed almost every hockey player it's happened to, but Backstrom's a different guy, so maybe he can come back at some point. But I think Oshie has to really step up here if the Caps want to really do anything.
Yeah, and here's the deal with TJ Oshie is that he plays much bigger than he is. He's not the biggest guy on the ice, but don't tell him that. He'll take on some of the biggest guys out there. You are correct, though. He did see a dip in his goal scoring there a bit. But I do think, Father Time is coming for us all, and that is kind of what they're talking about there is that aging roster. You take a look at Lars Eller and just a lot of the guys out there that aren't seeing quite the level of performance that they had at one time. But I do think that they do need to see TJ Oshie in top form. He is a really great playmaker and just a great all-around athlete in general. If you look back to his days in War Road, he was a great football player, just a really an all-around great guy. And not just a great hockey player, but I think just a real positive presence in the locker room as well. He's always quick to put a positive spin on thing, and he's not, always taking a dip into the doldrums if the Capitals aren't doing that well.
I think another guy on that list is Carlson, who's
Yep.
getting up there, and I think that's for me one of the bigger, I think, weaknesses for the Caps right now is the blue line. How do you look at it?
Yeah, so I mean, they did lose Schultz in the offseason here, and I think that they didn't get really quite the production out of him that they had hoped for. I mean, I think that he played okay, but to answer your question about John Carlson, he still, I think, at the end of the day, will be considered at the end of his career as one of the better defensemen on the Washington Capitals. Just a really kind of a workhorse out there. He doesn't miss a lot of time because of injury. And but yeah, you're right. He is getting a bit up there and older, and I think that is where these younger players fit in. If you take a look at Martin Ferravari, a guy that was slated to make the big team until the Capitals got Chara, and then he had to kind of be patient and wait one more year, but has just doing a really great job with the Washington Capitals, kind of brings a big physical game. And, that's the one thing I notice about a lot of these younger guys, the defensemen, is they have a lot of offensive upside as well. They're not just these stay-at-home defensemen, if you will.
Yeah, the other thing is what's also taken a dip and is sort of in the middle of the league is their power play. And look, Carlson's still great. I think the world of John Carlson and Ovechkin, but they are going to need, especially without Backstrom now, more catalysts on the power play because I feel like that it should be better than what it was last year.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And they are missing some big pieces out there. I know that around the league, Tom Wilson is seen as this goon, as this tough guy, but not a lot of goons score 20 plus goals. Ryan Reeves, I'm talking to you out there. So I know that he's a guy that everyone loves to hate, but that's
I don't hate Tom Wilson. Actually, I'll be honest. I like Tom Wilson. I interviewed him pre-draft. He's a terrific athlete. He's a fun guy. I interview him all the time. I happen to like him. It's just that we all know he gets a little carried away. He does.
He does. I mean, and he does play, high emotion, and I think that just he's a tough guy, so it just kind of comes in his nature to be a tough guy, and sometimes to his detriment. That's why he's been suspended multiple times, and that kind of thing. But they're getting that production out there. Kuznetsov was in the top 3 goal scorer out there, number 2 on the Washington Capitals. Evgeny Kuznetsov was one of those interesting players the year before was on the trading block, and
right.
Tarek El-Bashir, who covers the Capitals for The Athletic, they said, they would love to trade Kuznetsov, but they won't get enough for him. And, it's good on Brian McClellan and, maybe just fate or whatever you want to call it, that they were patient and they waited that one more year, because I think that he saw a level of maturity out there that was, lacking before. That was, a Kuznetsov that had some personal issues, shall we say, in his free time and got into, some COVID activity with some of the other Russians, Ilya Samsonov and Alex Ovechkin and the like out there. So I just think that, a lot of these players are starting to come into their own and getting some great goal scoring. But, when you do have Nick Backstrom and some of these integral players out of the lineup, you're going to need to see some of these younger players step up and fill those roles.
It's really interesting looking at the Caps and Pens with them being such a huge rivalry, but at the same time, they're in sort of similar situations with an aging core that they're trying to keep together for the superstars, right? And I'm just wondering how you see like the comparison between those two teams right now.
I mean, I do see a lot of the same things. You take a look at Crosby and Malkin and Letang, and those guys have been together for some time. And I do think to a certain extent that Penguins team is kind of going through a similar thing that the Capitals are going through. They are a little bit scared to make changes because this is the Washington Capitals team that won the Stanley Cup in 2018, and you don't want to kind of offset the chemistry too much. And you take a look at the Penguins, and they had quite a bit of success with Crosby and Malkin and Letang and the likes of those guys out there. So I think it's a bit of the same thing out there. I did do an episode where I talked about that it would have been a good idea for Malkin to come to the Washington Capitals. Our mutual friend Sean Woodley thought that was a good idea to kind of stir the pot there, if you will. But
I might have mentioned that about the Flyers as well. But
yeah, I mean, I think that would have been interesting, but he is kind of always prone to the injury bug out there as well. Mm-hmm. But you take a look at the Bruins, you take a look at the Capitals and the Penguins. They're all an aging roster that is staring change straight in the face. It's going to happen sooner or later. I just don't think it's going to be, kind of like what the Rangers did a few years ago. If you take a look at what the Rangers had out on the ice, it was one of those teams out there that they were getting no success out there. And it was a rough year and a half out there. But now take a look at the Rangers. They kind of went through some big changes and, they made a pretty solid push into the playoffs. So if the Capitals, or one of these other teams, the Penguins or the Bruins, if they could kind of emulate that a little bit, I think that going forward, that's a positive sign.
Yeah, for me, and I'm okay with Kuemper. For me, the biggest thing on the Capitals is, getting Dylan Strome to fill this role. He's not the fastest guy. He does have good hands. He does have ability. But when he was putting up big points, he had Patrick Kane next to him. And so it does make me wonder how far the Caps are going to go to try and get him to succeed without sort of really messing with their lineup too much, because it could go the other way too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they are going to. I mean, he's also can play winged as well. So if it just turns out that he's not getting that production, then I think that they're going to look at what their other options are, in the form of a Connor McMichael out there. But I would say that the one bugaboo or the one thing that the Washington Capitals had with their younger players, I was talking about with one of the beat writers for the Washington Capitals, is it wasn't sustainable. A lot of these young players that they worked into the lineup, they had flashes of greatness, but then they kind of dried off. So what you need is these young players to step up and sustain that goal scoring touch. Like you talked about with Dylan Strome. I mean, he's going to get, somewhat of a long leash, but if he's not getting that production, they're going to try to work someone else into that spot as well. And I think that would be good for some of the younger players as well.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to wrap up coming up next, but first, an important message from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration.
You're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes too many. As the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think about calling for a ride. Nah, you live nearby. You can make it home okay. It's no big deal. What are the odds you'll get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up. You lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over.
So when all is said and done, where do you think the Caps end up in the standings for the division?
I mean, I would like to say that I don't know if they're going to win the President's Trophy, but I do think that they should finish towards the top. If you take a look at the Capitals this season, they had 100 points. And generally speaking, if you take a look around the different divisions, that may have put you on the very top. But the Metro is a very competitive division. I mean, you guys know that as well. And so I think that they should finish near the top as long as they can get, all these pieces to fit together. You take a look at some of these teams and you sketch it out on paper and you look at it and you go, yeah, that looks like a pretty good lineup. But, you take a look at the Edmonton Oilers, for example. That is an all-star team out there. You got Nugent Hopkins and Draisaitl but they can't get the goaltending and they can never put it together. So if you take a look at the Washington Capitals, as long as the stars align and if you put all those pieces in the pot and it makes a nice casserole, then I think the Washington Capitals will be in a good position to do great things. I would like to say that they're going to make a push into the playoffs. My goal for them is to make a push at least into the second round, because the Capitals won in 2018, and after that, they have not made it past the first round. That should be their goal. I mean, obviously, I'd like a Stanley Cup, but even to make it past the first round, I think would be a good feeling.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think that's a really good goal for them to have. I don't know if they'll get there. I think it's going to be an interesting race in the division overall. And I think, the Caps should, in theory, be in the top three. But if the stars don't align properly, they could be on the outside looking in just because of the numbers game in the division.
Yeah, I mean, I think they got a lot better. There's a lot of teams out there that got a lot better. I mean, if you want to take a look at the Flames, for example, or you take a look at what Florida, I don't know if that's going to end up working out for them. And then Columbus getting Johnny Gaudreau out there. There's a lot of teams out there that potentially could be, just great teams. But if you want to kind of switch gears a little bit, I'm a big fan of the Washington Nationals, and they lost two big players to the San Diego Padres. Guess what? That didn't help that team. So sometimes things that are sketched out, they seem good, but in actuality, they're really not that great. But so the Capitals, I look at them on paper, it looks good. If that translates into actuality, that's another thing altogether.
Yeah, I think they're going to struggle to get past the Canes and the Rangers, but then I think they'll be in the mix.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, Dan, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about the Caps. And where can people find you out there?
All right, so you can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And then, of course, you can find the show wherever you find your podcasts, including YouTube. So when you're on YouTube, make sure and hit that subscribe button. And if you like the videos, hit the thumbs up button. It really helps grow the channel.
Thanks once again to Dan from Locked On Caps. A lot of fun information there. I have my doubts about the Caps coming into this season, but who knows? Maybe they'll make another run of it.
I still think they're going to eke out a playoff spot. That's my thinking.
Yeah. All right, we are going to wrap up the show with our Flyers fun thing / gritty thing of the week. And our first one was a kind of a controversial post from Gritty, where there was a sort of meme about with a whole bunch of different Gritties clapping at different rates until it comes together, kind of almost like the same feeling when they do that screensaver thing with the box bouncing into the corner and everybody claps when it hits the corner. Where all the claps come together, but the phrase was like, I have the clap, which is, not
I could see
maybe
the
the best.
hesitancy there.
Yeah, it's a good joke, but I think, maybe some people would be upset by it.
I could see that.
And then there was a TikTok about just some of the many times that Gritty has dumped popcorn all over people, which is always a good time, I think,
Until you get it dumped on you, then we'll see.
Well, it's crappy popcorn to begin with. You get in the arena.
Yeah, but if you just got your hair done, how would you feel?
Fair enough. And then the last thing, the Gritty 5K is back. I'm actually excited for this. I've done it the last couple of years remotely, and they send you a pretty cool medal and a t-shirt and lots of fun stuff. So I am looking forward to it again this year. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it in person or remote this year. There's a chance I could make it. It's Saturday, October 22nd. So there's a link to register as well in our show notes. So hope to see you there.
Yeah, I know people that have done it and they seem like it's a good thing. And look, anything that gets people moving is a good thing.
I think so too. All right, that will do it for today's show and for the week. We'll be back on Monday. We'll have any Flyers news. We're going to do another Flyers player deep dive on Rasmus Ristolainen. It's Monday, so we'll have our nemesis of the week. We are going to talk to our pal Joe Yerdon next week as well. So lots of good stuff coming up. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. Send us in your mailbag questions via Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. You can also drop us a note over on YouTube as well. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
You made us your first listen today. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL. Locked On experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast on all things NHL all year long. Stay up to date on everything in the hockey world with Locked On NHL, your daily NHL podcast. Thanks again for listening and have a great weekend, everybody.